This story is titled, At Our Engagement Ceremony, My Fiancée's Mother Mocked My Social Standing. She boldly proclaimed her daughter could easily find a better man, while my bride remained silent. Weeks later, when they came begging, I had already cut them off, leaving them with 19 desperate missed calls the next day. Hey everyone, I'm 28 years old and work as a structural engineer at a major construction company in Sacramento. My friend Mark has been pushing me to write this story down for months. He says I need to get it out of my system before I can truly move on with my life. I've never considered myself much of a writer, but I guess there's a first time for everything, so here we go. It all started 3 years ago at my cousin's birthday party. That's where I met Olivia. She was there with a mutual friend, and from the moment she walked in, I knew she was completely out of my league. She was the type of woman who commands attention, the kind that makes everyone stop and stare when she enters a room. Somehow, we ended up talking about some Netflix show we'd both been watching. I can't even remember which one anymore, but it seemed important at the time. Before the night was over, we'd exchanged Instagram handles. I was honestly sure she was just being polite and wouldn't respond when I messaged her later, but to my surprise, she did. Our first date was at this trendy hipster coffee place downtown. You know, the one everyone goes to for their fancy latte art and overpriced pastries. I was nervous as hell, constantly second-guessing everything I said and did. But Olivia seemed genuinely interested in me. She asked about my family, wanted to know about my hobbies, my work, everything. It felt like I'd hit the relationship lottery. Olivia told me she worked at a dental office and lived with a roommate in those new luxury apartments on the north side of town. Things moved pretty fast after that first date. Within 6 months, she was practically living at my place, a small 2-bedroom apartment I'd been renting for years. She stayed over 5 nights a week and had her stuff everywhere, but she kept her own apartment because, as she claimed, the lease wasn't up yet. Looking back, I should have seen that as the red flag it was, but when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all red flags just look like flags. 8 months into our relationship, I finally met her mother, Victoria. Olivia had been weirdly hesitant about introducing me to her family, but eventually, she set up dinner at some fancy steakhouse where the appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery budget. From the moment Victoria looked at me, I felt like cattle being inspected at auction. She kept asking pointed questions about my career plans and future goals, all while side-eyeing my regular Timex watch as if it personally offended her. When Olivia excused herself to the bathroom, Victoria leaned across the table and straight up told me that her daughter was used to a certain lifestyle, one that I would clearly struggle to provide. I laughed it off, thinking she was joking, but her face remained dead serious. When Olivia returned, the conversation immediately shifted to their recent Cancun vacation. Later that night, I told Olivia that her mom seemed a bit intense. She just shrugged it off, explaining that Victoria was protective because Olivia's dad had left them broke when she was 12. It made sense at the time, so I didn't push the issue any further. Fast forward another year and I decided it was time to propose. Nothing too fancy. I took her to Crystal Lake where we'd had our third date. I got down on one knee with a ring I'd spent months saving up for. Olivia seemed genuinely happy, taking about 50 selfies for her social media stories. What struck me as odd, though, was that her first call wasn't to her friends, but to her mother. She called Victoria while we were still at the lake, and that's when everything started changing. The wedding planning transformed Olivia into someone I barely recognized. Suddenly, everything had to be top tier. She somehow secured a venue that was normally booked 18 months in advance with just 4 months' notice. She also managed to book this mysterious high-end florist, Bloom & Co., that usually only handles celebrity weddings. When I brought up budget concerns, Olivia would simply say that her mom was handling most of it and that I shouldn't worry. But when deposits came due, guess whose credit card got charged? Mine, every single time. Whenever I asked about Victoria's promised contributions, Olivia would get this weird look on her face, like I just insulted her entire ancestry. She'd say things like, "Mom's organizing everything, that's her contribution," or "she'll reimburse us after." Spoiler alert, she never did. As the wedding approached, my savings account was completely emptied. Then my emergency fund disappeared too. I even had to dip into my land fund, money I'd been saving for years to buy property outside the city. I had never told Olivia about that fund. That detail becomes important later. The wedding day finally arrived, and despite everything, I was excited. Olivia looked amazing in her dress, the venue was admittedly perfect, and even my socially awkward brother Thomas managed to deliver a decent best man speech. Then came time for the parent toasts. My mom said beautiful things that made me tear up a bit. But when Victoria stood up holding her champagne glass, I swear the room temperature dropped 10 degrees. She started talking about how surprised she'd been when Olivia first brought me home. She called me unconventional compared to Olivia's previous boyfriends and kept mentioning how Olivia had always been attracted to ambitious men, clearly implying I wasn't one. The guests were getting visibly uncomfortable, exchanging those yikes glances across tables. Then she dropped the line that's been haunting me for months. This poor boy thinks he can provide for my daughter. Please, she's just using him until someone better comes along. A horrible silence filled the room. And then Olivia laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. A genuine laugh, like her mom had just told the funniest inside joke. I looked at Olivia, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, anything. But she just kept smiling at her mom with that look they've shared before, like they were the only two people in on some secret. My dad started to stand up. He's old school and doesn't take disrespect well, but my mom pulled him back down. I just sat there with a smile frozen on my face while Victoria finished with some backhanded comment about enjoying the ride while it lasts before sitting down. Thankfully, the DJ immediately cranked up the music and announced the first dance. Bless that man. Olivia grabbed my hand like nothing had happened and pulled me to the dance floor. I was in shock, just going through the motions while my brain tried to process what had just happened. Olivia kept whispering about how perfect everything was and how happy she was, while I nodded like a bobblehead doll. Later that night in our hotel room, I finally brought up the toast. I asked Olivia what her mom had meant by those comments. She rolled her eyes and said I was being too sensitive, that her mom just had a weird sense of humor that doesn't always land right. When I pressed her about why she had laughed, she got irritated and claimed she was just trying to smooth over an awkward moment. I let it drop. It was our wedding night, and I didn't want to start our marriage with a fight. But something had shifted inside me. A doubt that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had been there all along, and I'd just been ignoring it. Our honeymoon in Costa Rica was strange. Olivia was all smiles and affection when taking photos for Instagram, but distant and distracted when we were alone. She was constantly checking her phone, and when I asked who she was texting so much, she got defensive and accused me of being controlling. When we came home, we tried settling into married life, but that seed of doubt kept growing. Olivia started talking about buying a house right away in one of those gated communities on North Ridge, where all the doctors and lawyers live. When I pointed out that we couldn't afford anything there, she just said her mom would help with the down payment. Same story, different day. About 3 weeks after the wedding, I came home early because of a water main break at the job site. Olivia didn't hear me come in. She was on the phone in our bedroom, and though I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I froze in the hallway when I heard my name. She was talking to her mom, laughing about how I had no idea and how Nathan says the market is perfect right now. She mentioned something about establishing residency first, so the prenup wouldn't matter. Nathan, her ex from before me, the one who works in real estate, the one Victoria always brings up as an example of Olivia's usual type. I quietly backed down the hallway, went outside, and then came in again making plenty of noise. When Olivia came out of the bedroom, her phone was nowhere to be seen, and she looked flustered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, connecting it to Victoria's wedding toast, and to all the strange little moments that never quite added up. While Olivia slept beside me, I used her thumb to unlock her phone. She never changed her passcode after I caught her snooping through mine months ago. What I found made me sick. There were texts with her mom talking about the plan. Texts with Nathan that were way too friendly for supposedly just an ex. Screenshots of my credit report she'd run without my knowledge. Research on divorce laws in our state regarding assets and property. They were playing me and had been from the start. Their plan was apparently to use my steady income and credit to secure a mortgage on a nice house, establish residency, then divorce me for Nathan once the prenup timeline expired. In our state, the person who stays in the house during separation usually gets to keep it in the divorce, especially if the other person can't afford to buy them out. I wanted to wake her up right then and confront her, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe the sudden realization that I'd been living with a stranger for 3 years. Whatever it was, I decided to play the long game. See, what Olivia and Victoria didn't know was that I wasn't as financially stupid as they thought. Yes, I'd spent my visible savings on the wedding, but that land fund I mentioned earlier was actually much more than just a fund. I had already bought 5 acres outside the city limits 3 years before even meeting Olivia. It was paid in full, with the deed in my name only. I'd been saving to eventually build on it. I never mentioned it to her because some part of me always knew she wasn't as invested in our future as I was. The next morning, I acted completely normal. I kissed Olivia goodbye as she left for work, called in sick to my job for the first time in 2 years, and spent the day making phone calls. First to a lawyer to understand my options, then to my buddy who runs a construction crew, and finally to the bank to secure my accounts. For the next few weeks, I played the perfect, oblivious husband. I agreed enthusiastically when Olivia suggested house hunting. I nodded along when she showed me listings way above our price range. I pretended to believe her when she said her mom would help financially. Meanwhile, I was setting a plan in motion that would give Olivia and Victoria exactly what they deserved: the surprise of their lives. After the wedding reception disaster, I was in a weird mental place. You know that feeling when you're watching the ceiling fan at 3 a.m., wondering how your life turned into such a mess? That was me pretty much every night after hearing Olivia laugh at her mom's speech. I kept going through the motions, though. I woke up, made coffee, went to work, came home, watched whatever Olivia wanted on Netflix, and went to bed. Rinse and repeat. But inside my head was total chaos. Every time Olivia texted someone and smiled at her phone, my stomach would twist. Every time she mentioned her mom calling, I'd suddenly need to take a shower or check something in the garage. One morning, about 2 weeks after that phone call where Olivia was talking to her mom about Nathan, she left her laptop open when she went to shower. Her Gmail was right there on the screen, and a new email from Victoria had just popped up with the subject line: "Next steps." I shouldn't have looked, but also I absolutely should have looked. The email was basically a timeline. 3 months of playing house, in her mom's words, then start looking for houses in the right neighborhoods. Translation: places we couldn't afford. Get pre-approved for a mortgage using my income and credit. Since Olivia's credit was trash from maxing out credit cards her mom had helped her hide from me. Buy a house, establish residency, file for divorce, keep the house because I wouldn't be able to afford the payments alone. There it was, the whole plan written out like some twisted project management timeline. And the kicker? The email ended with "Nathan says the market in Oakwood Estates is heating up, so we may need to accelerate. He's already found 3 listings perfect for you." I closed the laptop, made another cup of coffee, and just sat at the kitchen table for like an hour. I didn't even realize I was sitting in the dark until Olivia came out of the bedroom and asked why I hadn't turned on any lights. That's when I decided to become what I call the silent builder. See, I've always been the type to talk through problems, communication and all that. But what do you do when the person you're supposed to communicate with is literally plotting against you with their mom? You shut up and make your own plans. The next day, I called my buddy Ryan, who runs his own construction crew. We've been friends since high school and worked together for years before he started his own business. I told him I needed help with a special project and asked if he could meet me at my land that week. Saturday came, and I told Olivia I was helping Ryan with a bathroom remodel. She barely looked up from her phone, just said something about being careful not to mess up my back again. I grabbed my tools and left. Ryan was already at my land when I pulled up, sitting on his tailgate drinking coffee from a beat-up thermos. He took one look at my face and said, I looked like I'd been hammered. He always had a way with words, that guy. I didn't tell him everything at first. I just said Olivia and I were having problems and I needed to figure out what to do with the property. We walked the land and I showed him the foundation I'd already laid for what was supposed to be our future home. It was a good foundation. Solid, properly done. I'd spent weekends getting it perfect, imagining Olivia and me building a life there. Ryan asked the obvious question. Was I still building the house as planned? That's when I finally told someone the whole ugly truth. The wedding speech, the phone call, the emails, the entire scheme. Ryan sat on a stack of lumber covered with tarps and just stared at me. Then he called Olivia something that would make my grandmother faint, followed by telling me I needed to talk to a lawyer yesterday. He wasn't wrong. Monday morning, I called in sick again and went to see a lawyer my dad knew. The guy was semi-retired, but still kept a small practice. I explained the situation and showed him screenshots of the email and played the recording of Olivia talking to her mom about Nathan and the mortgage. The lawyer, let's call him Robert, took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes like he was tired, and said he'd seen plenty of divorce cases, but this level of premeditation was something special. Then he asked what I wanted to do. That was the question, wasn't it? Did I confront Olivia? File for divorce right away? Try to salvage something clearly beyond saving? Robert advised documenting everything, limiting my financial exposure and considering my options carefully. But while leaving his office, what stuck with me was something he said almost as an afterthought. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but getting ahead. That's when the idea started to form. I went back to my land that evening and sat on my truck tailgate, looking at the foundation as the sun was setting. This piece of earth was mine, fully paid for before ever meeting Olivia. The building permits were in my name only, and I knew every contractor, supplier, and inspector within 50 miles. A plan came together. I pulled my crew together. Guys I'd worked with for years who I trusted completely. I told them I had a personal project and needed their help on evenings and weekends. Everyone was in, even my boss, who had been like a second dad to me since I started working for him at 19. He offered to help with materials and equipment. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the clueless husband, even going along with Olivia's hints about house hunting. Yeah, babe, that neighborhood sounds nice. Sure, I can ask about overtime to boost our down payment savings. Of course, your mom has great taste in kitchen countertops. But during evenings and weekends, I was building what my crew started calling the Spite House. We worked like machines. We got the framing up in record time, with plumbing, electrical, and HVAC all installed by guys who either owed me favors or were friends willing to help for beer and barbecue. I called in every connection I had for materials, some left over from other jobs, some at contractor pricing, some outright donated when people heard vague details of my situation. The whole time, Olivia was getting bolder with her plans. She started casually mentioning that her mom had a friend in real estate, Nathan, though she never used his name with me. She began leaving mortgage calculators open on her laptop where I'd see them. She even started talking about which of our furniture would look good in a bigger place. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. A text from Victoria popped up. Nathan found the one, showing tomorrow. I took a picture of the screen, set the phone back exactly where it was, and added it to my growing file of evidence. The next day at work, my boss pulled me aside. He'd been helping coordinate deliveries to my land and knew most of what was going on. He asked if I was doing okay. Something about the genuine concern in his voice nearly broke me. I'd been running on autopilot for so long, with anger and determination being my only real emotions, that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone genuinely care. I admitted I wasn't okay, not really, but that I would be. I just needed to finish what I'd started. That weekend, things came to a head. Olivia announced that her mom had found the perfect starter home for us and wanted to take us to see it on Sunday. I agreed, then casually mentioned that I had a surprise for her too. Something I'd been working on. Something that I thought would really show how much our future together meant to me. The look that crossed her face was a mix of triumph and barely concealed disdain. It told me everything I needed to know. She thought I was talking about agreeing to the house her mom had picked out, that I was finally falling in line with their plan. She suggested we make a day of it on Sunday, see her mom's house pick in the morning, then I'd show her my surprise in the afternoon. She readily agreed, already texting her mom about the schedule change. That night, I lay in bed next to the woman I now realized had never loved me, feeling strangely calm. The Spite House was nearly complete. My lawyer had all the documentation needed. I had discreetly moved important papers and family heirlooms to my parents' house over the past few weeks. Everything was in place. Sunday morning, Olivia spent ages getting ready, like she was preparing for a photo shoot rather than just a house viewing. We drove separately to meet Victoria, with Olivia saying she might go shopping with her mom afterward. Fine by me. The house Victoria showed us was exactly what I expected, way beyond our actual budget, in a pretentious neighborhood full of identical McMansions. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, granted everything, on a lot so small you could hear the neighbors breathing. Nathan was there too, dressed like he was auditioning for a real estate reality show, all white teeth and firm handshakes. I played along, asking all the right questions about mortgage rates and property taxes. Victoria kept making little comments like, "Don't worry about the numbers, we'll make it work," while Olivia gushed over walk-in closets and a soaking tub. After an hour of this charade, I checked my watch and mentioned it was time to head to my surprise. Olivia tried begging off, saying she was tired, but I insisted. "It's important to me," I told her. "I've been working on this for weeks." Something in my tone must have gotten through because she reluctantly agreed. I suggested Victoria come too, and Nathan as well if he wanted. "The more the merrier for the big reveal," I said. They all exchanged confused but curious looks. Olivia texted her mom something while I was talking to Nathan, but eventually everyone agreed to follow in their cars. I led our little convoy out of the fancy suburb, through town, toward the rural area where my land was. In the rearview mirror, I could see Olivia's face getting more confused the further we got from civilization. When I finally turned onto the gravel road leading to my property, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what could have been, anger at how I'd been deceived, but mostly anticipation for what was about to happen. As we crested the small hill, the Spite House came into full view. I heard car tires skid on gravel behind me as Olivia slammed on her brakes. I pulled up to the house, my creation, parked, and got out casually. I waited as Olivia, Victoria, and Nathan slowly approached, their faces pictures of absolute shock. It wasn't at all what they were expecting. It wasn't what anyone would expect. Their reactions were about to make weeks of exhausting work completely worth it. I had just dropped a bomb on Olivia and Victoria that I knew about their little scheme. The look on their faces was something I'll never forget, like they'd both simultaneously bitten into something sour while getting caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Olivia recovered first, switching tactics faster than my old truck changes gears, which is to say, not smoothly at all. She went from deer in headlights to waterworks in about 2 seconds flat. She started sobbing about how I was misunderstanding everything, how she loved me, how she'd never do anything to hurt me. Meanwhile, Victoria's face turned an interesting shade of red. Not embarrassed red, more like pissed off red, like how dare I catch them in their own scheme. She started talking over Olivia, saying I was being paranoid, that I was clearly unstable. "Look at this ridiculous house," she said, actually using the phrase, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," which made me laugh out loud. I reminded her that in our state, we'd only been married a few weeks. I documented all their scheming, and I pointed out that the land in this ridiculous house were purchased and mostly built before I even met Olivia, with my own money, in my name only. It wasn't marital property. That shut them up pretty quick. Legal threats only work when you have legal ground to stand on. Olivia tried a different approach, wiping away those fake tears and putting on her sweetest voice, the one she used to use when she wanted something expensive. She said we could work this out, that maybe she'd reacted badly to the house, but we could sell it and find something we both liked. She insisted that I was overreacting to a few harmless conversations with her mother. I just looked at her for a long moment. It was weird. A month ago, that voice and those eyes would have had me agreeing to anything. Now I just felt nothing, maybe a little sad at how easily she could switch emotions on and off. I told her simply that I wanted a divorce. I had already spoken to a lawyer who was drawing up the papers. She could keep the ring and whatever she brought into the marriage, but everything else would stay with its rightful owner. Olivia's face did this thing where it started to crumple, but then hardened when she realized tears weren't working. That's when she got mean. She started saying things about how I was never good enough for her anyway, how Nathan made 3 times what I did, how she wouldn't live in a clown house, her words, and how she'd been faking it in bed the whole time because I couldn't satisfy her. You know those moments in movies where insults are supposed to cut deep, leave the hero devastated? This wasn't one of those. Honestly, I just felt relieved. Every nasty word that came out of her mouth just confirmed I was making the right choice. Victoria joined in, of course. She said I'd trapped her daughter with pathetic fantasies of building a life together, that I was just jealous of people with real money and class, and that no woman with options would choose someone like me. I let them go on for a bit, partly because it was actually fascinating watching the masks come off completely, and partly because they were saying all this stuff in front of my phone's camera, which was quietly recording the whole thing. My lawyer had suggested getting their true colors on video if possible. Mission accomplished. When they finally ran out of steam, I just shrugged and said it was time to go. Olivia demanded to know if I was really going to make her live in that monstrosity until the divorce. I told her no. She could go back to our apartment, which was in my name, pack her things, and be out by tomorrow. She could stay with her mom or Nathan or whoever else wanted to deal with her. That set off round 2 of the shouting match. Olivia insisted she had rights to the apartment, and Victoria threatened legal action again. I reminded them that in our state, without kids and with such a short marriage, and with all the evidence I had, she'd be lucky if a judge didn't make her pay me alimony for wasting my time. That was BS, obviously. No judge would award me alimony, but they didn't know that. I could see the wheels turning as they tried to figure out if I was bluffing. The drive back to the apartment was the most awkward 30 minutes of my life. Olivia sat in stony silence in the driver's seat. Victoria kept trying to make phone calls in the back, probably to that lawyer they were threatening me with, but couldn't get a signal once we left the main road. I just stared out the window, feeling weirdly calm. When we got back, Olivia stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. Victoria told me this wasn't over, that they'd make me regret treating her daughter this way. I just nodded and said she should probably help Olivia pack. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, occasionally answering texts from Ryan asking how the big reveal went. I could hear Olivia and Victoria in the bedroom, alternating between angry whispers and the sounds of things being thrown into suitcases. Around dinner time, Olivia emerged. Her eyes were red, and she asked if we could talk privately. Victoria looked like she wanted to object, but Olivia shot her a look, and she backed off, saying she'd wait in the car. Once Victoria was gone, Olivia sat beside me on the couch, closer than necessary. She wasn't crying anymore, but her voice was soft, almost like the Olivia I thought I'd married. She asked if I was really sure about the divorce, said maybe we'd rushed into marriage without really knowing each other, and that she was willing to try counseling if I was. For a split second, and I'm not proud of this, I wavered. Not because I believed her, but because it's hard to just turn off feelings for someone, even when you know they've been playing you. Then she made her mistake. She reached out and put her hand on my thigh, letting it slide up just a bit. She said maybe we could talk about this in the bedroom first. Try to reconnect before making any big decisions. Just like that, the spell was broken for good. This woman who'd been screaming at me 2 hours ago, who'd been plotting to use me and leave me, thought she could just sleep with me and make it all go away. Like I was so desperate, so controlled by hormones that I'd forget everything at the promise of sex. I moved her hand and told her the divorce wasn't negotiable. She should finish packing and be out by morning as agreed. Her face hardened again, all traces of softness gone. She called me a few choice names, said I'd regret this. The usual stuff, then stormed back to the bedroom. They left about an hour later. Olivia took more than just her clothes. I noticed a few small valuables missing, like the watch my grandfather had left me and a pair of wireless earbuds I'd just bought. Petty, but not worth fighting over. Victoria didn't even look at me as they walked out. She just kept her nose in the air like she was too good to acknowledge my existence. The apartment felt strangely peaceful once they were gone. I ordered Chinese takeout, cracked open a beer, and put on a movie I'd been wanting to watch that Olivia had always vetoed. It was nice. Different, but nice. That piece lasted exactly 17 hours. I woke up the next morning to my phone blowing up with notifications everywhere. Texts from friends asking if I was okay, messages on Instagram from people I barely knew, asking what had happened, even an email from an old high school girlfriend saying she'd heard about my situation and was there if I needed to talk. Confused, I opened social media. There it was. Olivia had gone nuclear. She'd posted a long rant about how her husband of less than a month had abandoned her, tricked her into marriage under false pretenses, and built a spite house just to hurt her. She'd included a couple of pictures of the yellow building, taken from the car when we first pulled up, making sure to capture it from the worst possible angles. The comments section was wild. Most of Olivia's friends were sympathetic, calling me every name in the book. A few seemed skeptical, asking for more details that Olivia was conspicuously not providing. My mom had jumped into the comments defending me until my dad apparently made her stop engaging with that nonsense. I closed the app without commenting. Let her have her social media moment. I had the truth, the evidence, and most importantly, my freedom. But Olivia wasn't done. Next came texts directly to me, alternating between angry demands that I fix this by giving her a proper settlement, and tearful pleas saying she missed me and had made a terrible mistake. I blocked her number. Then she started showing up at my workplace, just happening, to be driving by when I was arriving or leaving. Once she brought Nathan along, the ex she'd been planning to leave me for. I guess it was supposed to make me jealous. He looked uncomfortable, like he hadn't signed up for this level of drama. I almost felt bad for the guy. After a few days of this, I was getting pretty tired of the whole situation. My lawyer assured me the divorce was straightforward and would be finalized soon, since we had no real assets to divide and no kids. But Olivia kept finding ways to drag things out, contesting every detail. What really changed the game was when Olivia's friends started reaching out to me. At first, I ignored them, assuming they were just going to give me grief on her behalf. But then one of them, a woman named Lily, who'd been Olivia's bridesmaid, sent me a long message saying she'd seen the real Olivia and wasn't surprised by what had happened. Turns out Olivia had pulled similar stunts with previous boyfriends, not the marriage part, but using guys for their money or status, then discarding them. Lily had watched it happen multiple times and had finally gotten fed up with Olivia's games. She offered to make a statement to my lawyer if needed. Then another friend came forward, and another. Apparently, Olivia had a whole history of this behavior that her carefully curated social media presence didn't show. And her relationship with Victoria wasn't the loving mother-daughter bond they portrayed. It was more like Victoria was the puppet master and Olivia the willing puppet. I didn't want to turn this into some big public drama, so I just thanked them for their support and passed their contact info to my lawyer in case we needed character witnesses. But knowing I wasn't the only one who'd been fooled made me feel a little less stupid about the whole thing. The most surprising call came from Nathan, the ex-boyfriend. He reached out through a mutual acquaintance, wanting to meet for a beer. Curious despite myself, I agreed. We met at this dive bar on the edge of town, where neither Olivia nor Victoria would be caught dead. Nathan looked nervous, kept checking the door like he expected them to burst in at any moment. He said he wanted me to know he wasn't in on their scheme, that Olivia had reached out to him after our wedding claiming I was controlling, and she wanted out. He admitted they'd hooked up a couple of times, but swore he didn't know she was planning to use me for a house. He said once he figured out what was really going on, he cut things off, but Olivia wouldn't stop calling him. Now he was afraid she'd try to use him the same way. I don't know if I believed everything he said, but he seemed genuinely rattled. We ended up talking for a couple of hours, comparing notes on Olivia's manipulation tactics. By the end of the night, we weren't exactly friends, but there was a weird sort of brotherhood in both having dodged the same bullet. As Nathan was leaving, he mentioned something that caught my attention. He said Olivia and Victoria had been telling people they were going to sue me for the Yellow House, claiming Olivia had contributed significantly to its value through her design input, even though she'd never seen it before that day. I laughed it off at the time, but the next morning I decided it might be worth taking extra precautions. I called my lawyer and asked what I needed to do to make absolutely sure Olivia couldn't touch my property. He suggested a few steps to protect myself legally. That's when I had an idea, a way to finally put this whole mess behind me and make sure Olivia and Victoria couldn't twist the narrative anymore. I made some calls, pulled some strings, and set things in motion. 3 days later, I invited a select group to the Yellow House. My parents, a couple of close friends who'd stood by me, Lily, Olivia's former bridesmaid, and on a whim, Nathan. I didn't tell them why, I just asked them to meet me there at noon on Saturday. The surprise on their faces when they pulled up to the yellow monstrosity was priceless, but the real shock was yet to come. It had been about 8 months since everything went down with Olivia and Victoria. The days following the house reveal were weirdly quiet. Olivia came back to the apartment that night after spending hours with her mom processing what had happened. I was already there, calmly packing some of my things. She walked in looking tired and puffy-eyed, just stood in the doorway watching me. I kept folding my clothes like she wasn't even there. Finally, she broke the silence and asked where I was going. I told her I'd be staying with my buddy Ryan for a while until we sorted things out. She nodded like this made perfect sense. Then she hit me with something I wasn't expecting. She wanted to try counseling. Yeah, I know. After all the scheming, the lies, the literal plans to divorce me that I'd uncovered, she wanted to work on our marriage. I almost laughed in her face but managed to keep it together. I asked her why she suddenly wanted to save a relationship she'd been actively sabotaging since before we even said our vows. Her answer was interesting. She claimed she'd gotten caught up in her mother's expectations and plans. That deep down, she did care about me, but had been confused about what she really wanted. That seeing how much effort I'd put into building something, even if it was an intentional monstrosity, made her realize I was serious about our future. For about half a second, I almost bought it. Then I remembered the phone call I'd overheard. The way she'd laughed at her mother's cruel wedding toast, the credit check she'd run without my knowledge, the texts with Nathan I'd seen on her phone. I told her counseling wasn't going to fix this. Nothing was going to fix this. I'd already filed for divorce, and the papers would be delivered to her tomorrow. Her face changed so fast it was scary. The tearful, repentant wife act vanished, replaced by cold fury. She told me I'd regret this, that no one threw away a relationship with her, and that I was making the biggest mistake of my pathetic little life. I just shrugged, zipped up my duffel bag, and told her she had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live since the apartment was in my name. Then I left while she was still screaming at me. The divorce itself was surprisingly straightforward. I had all the evidence of her deception documented and organized, and my lawyer was excellent. A recommendation from my boss whose brother practices family law. Olivia tried to contest it at first, making wild claims about emotional abuse and abandonment. But her lawyer must have talked some sense into her, because they eventually agreed to a clean split with no alimony. The most satisfying moment came during the single mediation session we had. Olivia's lawyer tried to claim I had wasted marital assets by building the yellow monstrosity. My lawyer calmly pointed out that I had purchased the land before our relationship began, used primarily my own labor and salvaged materials for construction, and that the property's value had actually increased despite the unusual structure because of rising real estate prices in the area. The mediator asked if I had any documentation of the property's value. I handed over an appraisal I'd had done the week before. Turned out the land alone was worth nearly 3 times what I'd paid for it 5 years earlier. The bizarre house was actually a non-issue since any serious buyer would just demolish it anyway. The mediator actually smiled a little when he looked at the photos attached to the appraisal. Olivia's face when she realized I was walking away with a valuable asset while she got nothing? Priceless. Probably the same look she'd planned for me to have when she eventually left me for Nathan after securing a mortgage in both our names. Speaking of Nathan, it turns out he wasn't as invested in their little plan as Olivia thought. About a month after I moved out, I ran into a mutual friend at the hardware store who told me Nathan had started dating someone else, a real estate client with actual money, not just schemes. Olivia had apparently shown up at his office having a full meltdown about it, and security had to escort her out. Victoria's reputation took a hit too. She'd always presented herself as this classy, wealthy widow who was just looking out for her daughter. But once word got around about what she'd tried to pull, and trust me, in our mid-sized city, word travels fast, people started connecting the dots. It turned out she'd pulled similar schemes before, encouraging Olivia to date men with good financial prospects, then helping her extract whatever benefits she could before moving on. Nothing illegal, just deeply manipulative and unethical. Several women from Victoria's supposed friend circle quietly distanced themselves. Her standing invitation to the country club charity committee somehow got lost. She was still invited to events, but no longer seated at the good tables. As for me, life got better. Way better, actually. I moved in with Ryan temporarily, but within 2 months, I found a small place of my own to rent while figuring out my next steps. Work picked up. My boss gave me more responsibility and a decent raise after seeing how I handled everything. Turns out emotional stability and not being actively scammed by your wife makes you more productive. Who knew? I decided to hold on to the land for now. My crew and I spent a few weekends demolishing the yellow monstrosity, which was oddly therapeutic, and cleaning up the property. I'm thinking of eventually building something. Maybe the house I'd originally planned, but just for me. Or maybe I'll sell it when the market peaks. There's no rush to decide. Dating again has been weird. I was upfront about my divorce with the first woman I asked out, expecting it to be a deal breaker, but she was surprisingly cool about it. She said her sister had gone through something similar and she understood trust issues. We went out a few times but didn't really click. I've been on a handful of first dates since then. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice to be reminded that not every woman is running a long con. The most unexpected development came about 3 months ago. I was at Home Depot picking up supplies when I literally ran my cart into someone else's. I started apologizing before I even looked up and realized it was Lily, Olivia's former maid of honor. Talk about awkward. She looked mortified to see me. I was ready to just nod politely and escape down another aisle, but then she blurted out that she'd wanted to contact me for months to apologize. She said she'd known some of what Olivia was planning, but not the full extent, and she'd felt horrible about it ever since. We ended up getting coffee afterward. She told me she'd had a falling out with Olivia about 2 months after our split. Apparently, Olivia had expected all her friends to take her side automatically, and when Lily suggested maybe Olivia should reflect on her own actions, Olivia had gone nuclear and cut her off completely. Lily and I have become unlikely friends. Nothing romantic. She's engaged to a guy who seems genuinely nice, but it's been healing to talk to someone who knew Olivia well and can confirm I wasn't crazy or paranoid. She's filled me in on some aftermath from Olivia's side, most of which I wouldn't have known otherwise. Like the fact that Olivia and Victoria had to downsize to a smaller apartment because they couldn't afford their previous place without my income contributing. Or that Olivia had to postpone her advanced certification because she couldn't get approved for loans. Olivia herself has tried to contact me twice. Once through a mutual friend, asking if we could talk about what happened. I declined. The second time was more direct. She showed up at my new place unannounced. I'm still not sure how she got my address. I was thankfully not home, but my neighbor told me she'd sat in her car outside for nearly an hour before leaving. I've heard through the grapevine that she's telling anyone who'll listen that I tricked her and wasted a year of her life. She conveniently leaves out the part where she was planning to use me for a mortgage and then leave. Classic Olivia. Victoria seems to have accepted defeat more gracefully, if only because she's busy trying to salvage her social standing. Last I heard, she was heavily involved in some church group, playing the role of the devoted mother supporting her daughter through a difficult divorce. I'm sure she's already scouting for Olivia's next target. As for me, life goes on. The house I'm renting has a decent yard where I've started growing tomatoes and peppers. My buddy's dog comes over to visit sometimes, and I'm thinking about getting one of my own. Work is steady and I'm saving up again. I started playing basketball on Thursdays with some guys from work. Nothing exciting, just normal life stuff that feels good after all the drama. Oh, and I did one more thing that felt important for closure. Remember those original plans I had drawn up for the house I wanted to build for Olivia and me? I finally dug them out of storage, looked them over one last time, then ceremoniously shredded them while drinking a beer on my back porch. Then I pulled out a fresh notepad and started sketching something new. Something just for me. It's smaller, more practical, but with a killer workshop space and a covered deck for rainy days. I have no idea when I'll build it, but it feels good to be planning something that's not tied to lies or manipulation. I still have moments where something will remind me of Olivia or the whole mess, and I'll feel a flash of anger or sadness. Ryan says that's normal, and it'll probably happen less as time goes on. He's probably right. 8 months isn't that long in the grand scheme of things. If there's any lesson in all this, I guess it's to trust your gut. I knew something was off from the first time I met Victoria, but I ignored it because I was so caught up in Olivia. I ignored a lot of red flags because I wanted so badly to believe I had found someone who genuinely cared about me. Next time, if there is a next time, I'll pay more attention to those little warning signs. The way someone treats waitstaff, how they talk about their exes, whether their actions match their words. All stuff that seems small in the moment, but adds up to who a person really is. Life goes on, right? Life goes on.